What is up, guys? EJ Stewart here, joined by Kendall Stewart, and welcome to our NBA Draft pre-show live stream. You see the counter above Kendall's head. That is the countdown to 8 o'clock Eastern when the NBA Draft starts. This is a big moment here for New Generation Media. It's the first time, Kendall, we've ever done a live stream on draft night. Kendall, welcome, man. This is the big time. I feel like we're continuing to level up here on the YouTube channel. Shout out to everybody that's been supporting us throughout the entire draft season, not just since the NBA playoffs started in the off season, but also throughout the college basketball season. And I'm really happy to have this conversation with you and have a conversation with the fans throughout the next hour and 13 minutes we have here.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, we have like you said now about hour and change to go until this draft starts. But um as we know, draft night in both the NBA and the NFL is the it's not only the start for the for making picks and where these rookies start their journeys, but it's also where a lot of other news happens. And
Yes.
sometimes stuff not even pertaining to the draft happens to break on the draft. Aaron Rodgers last year during the NFL draft was like, I want out of Green Bay. That had nothing to do with the draft, but
Exactly.
decided to happen on draft night. And I feel like in the NFL, in the NBA, we've got some similar stuff happening. So it's funny how the stuff sometimes happens on draft night. But yeah, phones are going on all 30 teams right now. Uh, Teams, figuring out where they're going with with their picks, where they're going also with some of the personnel on the roster. So yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting night. So
It
uh,
is. It's an exciting night for the young men that are getting drafted. I want to shout out all the young men that are getting drafted tonight. We've been covering a lot of you guys, not just this year, but in previous years, following the college basketball and international stage. This is a big night for these young gentlemen. I want to make sure we give them a massive shout out and congratulations to all the people that will get drafted, and shout out to the dudes that might not get drafted tonight, because we've seen plenty of undrafted fairy tale stories where guys who don't get picked on this night turn out to be major contributors in the NBA. So we're going to get to plenty on a lot of these players throughout the next hour and 12 minutes. Kendall, let's kind of start with what has been breaking, which is a little outside the purview of the NBA draft, but I think it's important we do at least touch on it, which is the situation going on with the Brooklyn Nets. So the Nets right now are locked into a contentious negotiation with star point guard Kyrie Irving. He had the opportunity to opt out and become a free agent this off season, or he could potentially opt into his player option for 1 year, about $36 million. Kyrie wants a long term extension. As of right now, the Nets seem very reluctant to give him that extension, and that is leading to this high stakes game of chicken, essentially, where you got Kyrie saying, "Well, if you don't sign me to a long term extension, I have teams that are lined up to potentially take my services, and you might actually end up losing out on one Kevin Durant if you decide to not re-sign me to a long-term deal." And then it was very ironic, Kendall. These Woj and Shams tweets happened, I think, literally within minutes of each other. First one being this one from Woj. Kyrie lists several teams that he will be interested in a potential sign and trade or opt-in and trade situation. Those teams listed there: the Lakers, Knicks, Clippers, Heat, Mavs, and 76ers are the teams that Kyrie would be interested in if a long-term deal cannot be worked out with the Nets. And then right after that, Shams posted Kevin Durant monitoring the Kyrie net situation and weighing future options. So this is pretty much your worst case scenario, I think, if you're a Brooklyn Nets fan, or if you're with the Brooklyn Nets and you're seeing the situation with Kyrie potentially impact Kevin Durant's future. Real quickly, what do you make of some of the stuff that we're hearing about this situation? How do you think this situations are playing out?
uh, if you're a Brooklyn Nets fan, I don't think that this is the podcast to be listening to for a Boston Celtics supporter, EJ, the resident Knicks supporter. Uh, we both have our own personal beefs with the Brooklyn Nets. But with that being said, I'll try and be as impartial as I can be.
Which is what we
Um,
should do here.
I feel like I feel like the net situation is it's very bizarre because you feel like Obviously Durant and Kyrie have been in a situation where they haven't won anything um, yet in Brooklyn. They really have only had they really only took one real swing at it. I mean, I guess last year was also a swing, but it was a massive swing and miss. But they only had 1 year where they even got close to competing for a championship. So this feels like a massive failure um, with what we've seen so far from this tandem. And then James Harden had a brief stint on tour with them in 2021. But I really feel like this is where this all sort of culminates, or where this all has started to bubble up, is obviously the bizarre nature of Kyrie Irving and all the stuff that they've had to deal with regarding him. But then also, that's what it stems from. And then also having to then make the decision of, well, Kyrie's a free agent. Do we want to give this guy a long-term deal, given all of the hullabaloo that we've had to deal with over the last 2 years? And then Kevin Durant being like, well, if Kyrie's not here, then I don't necessarily want to be here. So it's and Kevin Durant also being a guy who he just saw the Golden State Warriors win a championship, and he's took a lot of flack, and obviously he's taken a lot of Twitter jabs at guys over the last couple of days that have taken shots at him. But do we do we think that the Golden State Warriors championship has played a factor in Kevin Durant's uneasiness about the Brooklyn Nets situation right now? Because if Kyrie leaves for nothing, or even if he leaves in a sign and trade, he's going to feel stranded by himself. We talked about it off air. I mean, the Nets could trade for Jalen Brunson, trade him to Dallas for Jalen Brunson. And does Kevin Durant feel like he can win a title with Ben Simmons and Jalen Brunson as his running mates? I don't know. So then that's what Kevin Durant right now needs, a championship. He may not admit it before his legacy, and to shut up
Yeah, he'll never admit it.
yeah, he'll never admit it, but to shut up the all the cloudiness, he's gotta win one. So, and I don't know what's gonna happen in Brooklyn, especially if Kyrie leaves.
I tell you what, man, it's this is wild, and I tweeted a bunch of questions, kind of trying to figure out what exactly is going on, because I guess for me, I think Kevin Durant and Kyrie situation is not that hard to dissect. It's clear that these two young gentlemen, can't say I'm young, I think Katie's older than me. These gentlemen have, and Kyrie I think is my age. These gentlemen have formed and forged a bond that goes beyond basketball. So people who ask, why the hell did KD leave the Warriors to play with Kyrie? Why the hell does he care so much about Kyrie leaving? These gentlemen clearly have a bond that goes beyond basketball. So I'm not really necessarily so much interested in that, though. The one aspect of that does make me kind of ask questions is, does he potentially know that the return they'll get for Kyrie is trash? And then he's like, I'm not playing with Brunson or the guys you mentioned. Like, I'm not dealing with that. Does he know that already? Like, have the Nets already came to him and say, hey, we want Kyrie out of here, and these are the kind of offers we're gonna
John
get.
Wall, Westbrook, like even
Yeah, that same hellscape I keep talking about with the Westbrook and John Wall situations. Does Kyrie now get roped in to that hellscape? I know Durant wants nothing to do with that, but I think from the Nets standpoint, what is their end game here? Because clearly they don't want Kyrie Irving back on a long-term situation. I don't blame him. I wouldn't want him back on a long-term situation either. But if you're the Brooklyn Nets, losing Kevin Durant to me has to be like a non-starter. Like you can't let that happen. He's the face of the franchise. He is one of the top players in the game. He's one of the greatest players to ever play in the game. Yes, he is getting older, and yes, he's on a massive deal that begins just right now. Essentially, this is the first year of that 4-year, $190 million extension that he signed. But I don't think losing him is something that they're trying to do. But it seems like they run that risk with what they're doing here. So what is their end game? Do they really feel like they can play this game of chicken with Kevin Durant? I don't think they care about Kyrie Irving. I think they're fine saying, yeah, if you're not going to sign a short-term deal, then there's the door. But with Kevin Durant, is it worth taking that kind of risk, playing that high stakes game of chicken with him? Because I don't know. I wouldn't have the stomach for it. I can't say that it's the right or wrong move. I know I couldn't do it if I was Sean Marks.
Yeah, obviously, look, the problem is it's a package deal, and that's where they're at. I mean,
yeah.
Are we gonna? I mean, obviously this is the draft pre-show, but are we gonna play the game real quick of like Kyrie already gave his list of teams. It's an interesting list, but it's the list that most people have put out there anyway. What about Kevin Durant? And what is Kevin Durant's trade value like in the open market? Because that's the thing we talk about. Well, where do the Brooklyn Nets go if you don't have Kevin Durant? Well, I mean, if Kevin Durant can get you back a king's ransom, then maybe you just say, well, we'll just start from there. But I don't know what that is. Kevin Durant, like you said, is signed long term somewhere, so
Yeah.
you would think that opens up the floor for every team in the league to be like, hey, we have an offer. So does that give the Brooklyn Nets some leverage in this case? That yeah, I mean, you say you want out, but we could send you to Utah, and you have no
Right.
control unless you're going to retire,
Yeah.
say, or pull a Ben Simmons. So it's interesting. I think a team like Phoenix would probably want to get involved. Um, I'm sure Philly would want to get involved on some level, but obviously the Harden situation made it kind of weird. But there's some teams out there, obviously, and I would assume a lot of those teams on Kyrie's list, would also want to try and get involved. So, but in reality, because of the nature of his contract, every team's would want to get in the mix if Durant ended up requesting a trade. But yeah, it's a weird situation. And then there's some smoke out online that Washington may wind up being a potential destination, and then Portland's another team that's been thrown out there as well. I wouldn't. I would be cool with seeing We're not gonna. It's not gonna happen, but I think an OKC return would actually be pretty favorable to his legacy. So those are all things that people have talked about and people have theorized. But right now, everybody's in the dark, just waiting to see what happens with Kyrie first.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens with the Kyrie situation and the KD situation, man. It is bizarre. I think that is not an accident that Kyrie's team and Durant's team put this out on draft night right before we get to the real fun of the selections. They wanted to get this headline out to be the main headline. They are at war with the Brooklyn Nets. I
Uh,
don't want to
it-
call it a war in terms of them saying we want to destroy them or anything like that, but they want to stay together and they want to stay together in Brooklyn. And they are
yeah,
using all of their political weight to make that happen when it is very obvious that the Nets do not want it to happen. They do not. They may want Kevin Durant, but I don't think they want Kyrie Irving. And I think their way of saying, well, we don't want you for a long term situation, is their way of saying they don't want him back. Because if they really did want Kyrie Irving, they just agree to sign him long term. They don't want him back, I think, because they know that in their eyes that he's unreliable, and that's where they're at. But let's get to some of the other stuff with this draft. Like I said, it's a big night. We'll get to some of the other moves. One big move has already been made out west, and we'll talk about some of the rumors that we heard really late last night regarding one Deontay Murray. But I want to talk about the actual draft here because it's an interesting night. It was really weird when I woke up this morning, Kendall, and saw the betting odds favorite was Paolo Banchero to be the
that's very
number one
bizarre.
overall pick, completely out of nowhere. No reporting, no tea leaves out there. Just out of nowhere, the odds from him went from like 1,500 plus 1,500 something crazy down to
Yeah.
like minus 200, like just numbers that just didn't make sense and made people think, well, is there something that Vegas knows that anyone else doesn't know? I kind of thought that they did, and I was kind of expecting to hear more reports tonight saying, hey, you'll never believe what happened, guys. Paolo Banchero actually will be the number one pick. But that's not what happened. All the people that do the mock drafts, all the people that have been kind of handicapping this situation, the insiders, the mock draft people, they all stood firm and said, no, we still believe that it will be Jabari Smith from
We still
Auburn.
believe that Orlando is zeroing in or locking in on. It's a
Yes,
very firm
that is
decision.
the right. That is the language that Woj loves to use and Shams loves to use. But yeah, the idea is that there's no difference. That right now it's going to be Jabari at 1, it's going to be Chet at 2, and it's going to be Paolo at 3.
Our mock draft still stands.
Our mock draft still stands. I had our mock draft as Jabari Smith, and I'm gonna stay there because I've seen nothing else to suggest it's gonna be anything different. But did this give you pause, Kendall, that perhaps this Orlando Magic and this new regime here with Hammond and the new coach Jamal Mosley? Like, do you feel like perhaps maybe something surprising may happen, and perhaps we will see a drastic move that brings someone like Paolo to Orlando? Do you still believe what we're hearing from the reports that it will be Jabari Smith?
Yes, I believe it'll be Jabari Smith. I feel like we're talking about a team that is they're in a weird situation because so first of all, let me put it out there that I think that the reason why things may have shifted, from in Vegas regarding Paolo potentially being the number one pick is I think there may have been trade talk. Um,
Interesting.
I
Okay.
think there may have been trade talk between Houston and Orlando. That's just a theory, but
That's
I
a
don't
good
think
theory, actually.
Orlando. Yeah, I don't think Orlando was ever. They just decided last minute. Actually, we're gonna go with Paolo, um, because Woj then early in the morning said no, it's still gonna be Jabari number one. So I don't. The only thing that could have changed is maybe there were some trade discussions that people thought were pretty serious that maybe may still happen, but or it may fall apart. Um, or it may have fell apart. But yeah, no, I think Orlando is going with Jabari. I would go with Paolo number one. I think that he's number one on my board. But Jabari, when you're talking about Jabari Smith, you're talking about one of the best, obviously, shooters in this draft. You're talking about one of the best, upside players in this draft. He's a guy that defends. He's versatile. Handle needs to improve, but um, it's a projection. You feel like if I look forward 5 years from now, Jabari Smith could very well end up being the best player in this draft. And how many times do we look at the guy who winds up being the rookie of the year, which I don't think would be Jabari Smith, but I could be wrong. But how many times do we look back and said the guy who ends up being the rookie of the year is not the guy who is the best player 3 years from now, 5 years from now?
Hmm.
Giannis did not win rookie of the year. I don't even know if he was all. I don't know if he was, first team or second team all rookie. But Giannis obviously by far the best player from the 2015 or 2013 rather 2013 NBA draft. So yeah, no, I mean I feel like Jabari Smith. I get the excitement over Jabari. Um, and I mean I guess you feel like having him and Franz Wagner as combo forwards with Cole and Suggs and Hampton and Wendell Carter down low and potentially Mo Bamba still long term. It's a nice start, man. I definitely you should get excited if you're an Orlando Magic fan.
Yeah, I would be as well. Sorry for the all
Yeah, I know we were going
the
through the
we were going through several players.
lights.
You did see some of the players that we were talking about, Paolo and Chet. You also saw some other guys that we talked about over the
I felt
course
like
of
I
this
was in
time.
I felt like I was in an elevator and I was
I
going through
know,
some sort
right?
of slideshow.
Yeah. And as Lee
Did
there.
you leave?
Yeah, but to me, I do think this is an interesting situation, Kendall. I mean, I think I expect it to be still Jabari. I think you're right. I think that you made a really good point about the potential trade situation. Like, because I could not figure out why. And you're actually, and shout out to anybody who had that idea and I just didn't see them. You're the first person I seen that said, oh, it probably was something with a trade situation is why we had that whole thing come about. Because it didn't make any sense to me as to why we were hearing about Paolo this late in the game. I do expect it to be Jabari Smith. I'm cool with it being Jabari Smith. I do think that in many ways he fits Orlando in a lot of ways that helps them get better immediately. I know Paolo may be the more uh, he's the supernova offensive individual talent when it comes to the isolation game, the way he can create for himself. But as I said when we did our mock draft, I really do believe that one Orlando needs someone who can contribute on both sides of the ball, which is something uh, that Jabari brings. Paolo not necessarily the greatest defender, and they need shooting. Jabari is arguably the best shooter in this draft. The guy that you saw a couple of minutes ago, Hyung Jun Lee, is a guy that Kendall has identified as perhaps the best shooter. But Jabari is perhaps the best shooter in this draft, even though he's 6'10", 6'11". I think he fits better with some of the players that they have already. Someone like a Wendell Carter in the front court and a Franz Wagner. I think that spacing and that 3-point ability and then the defense on both sides of the ball, I think that gives Jabari the advantage for me just for as a fit standpoint. You want to try to tell me that Paolo is going to be better long term? I'm not going to fight you on it. Paolo is a tremendous, tremendous talent. But I just think for Orlando, Jabari just makes a little more sense because of his ability to to defend on both ends, his ability to stretch the floor, and I think he'll be able to create opportunities for other guys because of his stretchability. Whereas Paolo, he comes in and he makes an impact because he can score the damn ball, which is unbelievable and awesome. And shout out to his ability to do that. Just not sure if that's exactly what they need right now.
Yeah, and then look, I know at number two, I know in our mock draft, I had the Thunder getting Chet Holmgren, but I am a little surprised that the Thunder are actually going to go with Chet Holmgren. Um,
That's what they're saying right now. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and I guess that's sounds like that's the spot, one of the spots he wanted to go to. Um, and also, by the way, I personally hate Woj telling us who the top three is going to be like before, at 12 o'clock.
Yeah, man. Yo, shout out to Woj. Obviously, we've talked about him enough on this show already, and we'll talk about him probably up until 8 o'clock. But yeah, we're off the whole. You can tell us what the draft's gonna be before it happens. I mean,
Right.
there is nobody has interest in knowing
Like,
before it happens.
yeah, like you can do the whole live thing where 5 minutes before a pick happens, I'm telling you. But like at the beginning of the day, you're telling me, yeah, this is likely what the top three is going to be, and then I know, and he's done that the last like 5 years now, so I've gotten used to it. But you know, again, it's just we get it, Woj, before everybody else.
But what do you think about
regardless,
that? What do you think about that fit with Chet and OKC and some of the guys that they have already? We've been hearing that they're apparently extremely. You never know if some of these things or other teams want these guys or if the players are really up for the trade market. But the word is that Lou Dort can very much be had. Whether
right?
it's other teams that really want him and trying to get that out so they can pressure OKC into trading him, or if OKC really is just shopping him around saying, yo, who wants Lou Dort? What do you think of kind of where OKC is coming into this draft with 2 and 11, and then this situation with Chet potentially being the guy for them at 2?
I mean, the fit with Chet to me. I mean, I like it with the players that they have right now because right now, look, we know OKC is not ready to win. And Chet, obviously, we could say Chet's a project, but he also was one of the more impactful players in all of college basketball last year. So he's gonna make an instant impact if he can physically withstand the NBA, the load, the workload in the NBA. Then he'll make an impact because that's what he's done in high school. It's what he's done in college. So I have no reason to believe he won't be an impact player, but at the same time, he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who's going to come in and average 20 points a game or even 16, 15. So you understand that, the Thunder right now, they have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who obviously he's an excellent player, but doesn't always play every game, whether it's because of tanking or injury or whatever. Um, the Thunder sometimes lack the offensive punch that something like somebody like Paolo Banchero would be able to provide consistently. So it feels like a pick where you're going more so for the long term impact of what your roster could look like than even what it looks like right now. But even for what it looks like right now, I mean, it is certainly enticing to have a core that includes Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Josh Giddey and Trey Mann.
Yep.
And now you throw Chet Holmgren into the mix. Those are, a lot of your primary guys. You mentioned Lou Dort is a guy that is there now, but we don't know. He may not be here past tonight.
Yeah.
But it's a nice core, and then obviously there's some smoke out there that OKC is also trying to trade back into the top 5 or the top 10, with that number 12 pick that they have. And there's word that a guy like Shaedon Sharpe might be interested in going to OKC, given his relationship with a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That might be enticing to him. There's word that they may be very interested in Jaden Ivey as well. I don't really know the fit unless you're also moving one of the aforementioned guards that they already have. So yeah, OKC is probably, I think they're the most exciting team to watch tonight in terms of what they're going to do. I mean, Sacramento was that team until we got all this buzz that they're just going to be boring and draft Keegan Murray.
Well, yeah, let's talk about Sacramento. I think you make a lot of great points about OKC, but as you said, a lot of people really believe that Sacramento is where this draft begins. They have the number 4 pick in the draft. There's a lot of teams and a lot of people inside the NBA who believe that Jaden Ivey from Purdue is the definite number 4 player. There are some teams, I believe, I've heard in this draft that think he's the actual best player in this draft. So it is meant that because of the value with Ivy and the fit with Sacramento, where they've had all of these guards recently, they have Fox, they have Mitchell, they just had Halliburton, who they traded for Domantas Sabonis. It has led people to think, hey, maybe we're in a situation here where the Kings will look to deal this pick to a team that is desperate for Jaden Ivey. As we're hearing as of today, it sounds like, hey, they may just keep the pick and take someone like Keegan Murray and let someone like Ivy fall to 5 to Detroit, to Detroit, who I think it sounds like would take him in a millisecond. That's the word that they badly want him. But I'm not exactly sold, Kendall, that it is a situation where that Sacramento does indeed keep this pick. I think that this is some more posturing from Monty McNair and the crew over there in Sacramento. I think that there are a lot of teams that are extremely interested in Jaden Ivey. I believe the Pacers to potentially be very interested. I believe the New York Knicks to be very interested. And I think it's going to come down to the wire. And that's some of the reporting we've gotten from people like Ian Begley of SNY, for who covers the New York Knicks, who said that this is going to be pretty much right up into the wire with whether or not they decide to make a trade with the Kings for Jaden Ivey. But are you not convinced that this is going to end up being kind of a game of chicken right up to the wire, or are you more firm to believe that we will see the Kings just take someone like Keegan Murray here?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, that's what the reporting suggests. Obviously, sometimes the reporting is used to help play the game of chicken, like you said. So
yeah,
so you never really know. But to me, I mean, look, I talked to you off air about it. I mean, there are times where we assume a team has to trade down. Like, Sacramento, if you're not going to take Jaden Ivey, you got to trade that pick because Jaden Ivey is by far the best player available. So you got to trade it and take the guy you're going to take it for at 7 or take him at 9 or whatever. Right. We assume that is the case, but sometimes teams just decide to stand in the pocket and take the guy who's the highest on their board, and sometimes it winds up being a reach. Sometimes you don't even have to be worried that a team behind you is going to draft him. Sometimes you are worried, and that's really the crux of the Keegan Murray situation, because Detroit is right there at 5, and Detroit may say, we'll take Keegan Murray. I would assume Keegan Murray would be high on their board. I don't know if he'll be the guy, but you can decide that we're gonna trade down to 7 or trade down to 10 or trade down even to 6 with I don't know. I mean, when I think about it, I look at who are the best players available, who are the teams that are drafting behind you, and you have to make the overall case of how far you can go while still getting the guy that you want. And right now, if you're Sacramento and the guy you really want is Keegan Murray, you might have to just draft him at 4. It may not be the best player. He may not be the best player on the board, but to me, I think it's a smarter play than trading down with a team like Portland or a team like Indiana. Because Indiana, I guarantee you, would want Jaden Ivey. But
oh yeah,
if Detroit's going to draft Keegan Murray, then it's not worth it.
Yeah, I tell you what. I mean, it's a tough situation with them. I mean, I would be inclined, if I was Sacramento, to try to get the most value for this pick, given what they're telling us. What they're telling us is this is a team that is looking to win now. This is a team that feels like they are not that far away from potentially making the playoffs, or even if they do feel like they're far away, they're going to do whatever they can to finally get into that postseason. So if that is the case, and you don't feel like Jaden Ivey is a fit for your team, I don't know why you wouldn't try to maximize that positioning by trading down a couple of spots or even going down to 11. I know it may sound biased as a Knicks fan, but trading down, getting some pieces, some veteran pieces, guys that can come in and contribute right away, still keeping a pick in the lottery, and moving on from there. I think that is what their game plan is. I like Keegan Murray. I think Keegan Murray is a really solid player. I think that he actually fits extremely well next to Domantas Sabonis if they're going to play small and the bonus plays the five. You have two very highly skilled players at the 4 and 5 playing there together. I think that they could have great chemistry. Not sure how you're going to be defensively, and that's been a problem for the Kings for a long time. And that's kind of where we've talked about it. We talked about it, I believe, on our podcast. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Where what is the situation with the Sacramento Kings and how they feel about Mike Brown? Because oftentimes we'll see a team hire a coach, and we think because of who they hired as a coach, that will impact who they end up drafting. But that actually ends up really being not the case. The coach, especially in this situation when you're coming in helicoptering as late as Mike Brown is right now, you're not very clued into the draft process. And it ends up being kind of really just Monty McNair's decision and the front office's decision. Mike Brown's a defensive coach. So whoever they pick here, does he have any say? Will he be concerned if you go with a guy like Murray who maybe doesn't fit great defensively with Sabonis, even though offensively I think it's a match made in heaven. Is that the reason why they're not crazy about Ivy? Because Ivy's not a great defender. We know Mike Brown is obviously a defensive coach, and Ivy's a guy going to be on the ball a lot. That could be problems. So these are all different situations that I think will have to be decided upon by the Kings when they get up to that point. But I think the draft starts there. I am of the belief that they will move. I am of the belief that they are trying to get everything that they can. The word is that if you have multiple first round picks to give us, we are willing to talk. And I think that somebody who loves Jaden Ivey, it very well might be the New York Knicks, who will look at that and say, all right, we really want this guy, and if you're willing to play ball, we'll give you a Cam and maybe an IQ or somebody, and we'll give you some picks and say, here you go. I don't know. I'm not even sure how I feel about it, but I feel like when it gets to push come to shove, that will happen.
So you said, I agree with what you said about Mike Brown, because that is interesting, obviously, because in basketball especially, you feel like the style of coach, the coach wants the personnel to be able to run their system. They want to be they want, if you're going to be a defensive coach and we're going to play maybe a slower pace, or you want guys who you feel like are high level defenders. And I'll be honest, we look at the guys on the board, like they're not going to be. I mean, Jeremy Sohan, might be the best defensive prospect, in that range, but that's a massive reach if you go in that direction. So there aren't many guys, in that range that are going to be great defensive prospects. So, there is also the opposite mindset of, sometimes some coaches have the mindset of, look, I'm Mike Brown, man. I can get defense out of anybody. What I do need is, look, my offense sometimes can stagnate. My X's and O's can be sometimes shaky sometimes on the offensive side of the ball. But give me some guys that can score, and we'll figure out the defense. We'll figure out the defense later, because I'm such a great defensive coach. So it could go both ways. And Keegan Murray might be the best offensive player also on the board in terms of scoring at the college level. So in that regard, it may make some sense, especially if the word is Vivek is really high on Keegan Murray. He may think that same thing of, look, Mike Brown's a great defensive coach. We need some guys that can put the ball in the hole. So
yeah, exactly.
That's one thing.
But it is weird only because this is a team that has been good offensively. I mean, let's put respect on their name as an offensive team. They have been a strong offensive team with Gentry, with Walton. Like, that's always been kind of a staple for them. They haven't been able to guard anybody, and that's been their problem. So But again, he could, or any coach could feel like, look, just give me the dogs, give me the horses offensively, and I'll figure it out.
So you say the draft starts at 4, and I think that is, it's true unless the Kings just stand pat and draft Keegan Murray, which is still interesting, but it'll still be chalk to what the reports say. Mm-hmm. What we don't know is, in that scenario, what happens at 5, because that, to me. Right. And we sort of had a similar scenario in our mock draft.
Yeah.
Where, it wasn't Keegan Murray, but we had Jaden Ivey available, past 5. Is there a chance Jaden Ivey slips in this draft? Because he is, in many people's eyes, the 4th best player. Some people think he's a top 3 guy.
It's funny you say that, Kendall, because when I thought about the situation, and because my New York Knicks are involved with the situation, there are some memories of what happened with Obi Toppin that do persist when I see how this Jaden Ivey thing is shaking out. Because if you remember what happened with Toppin, the word was
Yeah,
that he would be the guy. I think it was at number 4. I think it was the exact same number. I think. Whoever.
5 to
Oh, it's
Cleveland.
5 of Cleveland, right? I couldn't remember where they were. So 5 that Obi Toppin very well could be the guy, but that the Knicks were among teams that were extremely interested
Yeah, they're
in
banging the
Obi
table
Toppin.
trying to get up to
That were,
5.
that were trying to do anything they can. We saw the Knicks make a trade before the draft to put themselves in a position to potentially get to 5. And then when we got to draft night, we saw Cleveland take Okoro. It wasn't the biggest surprise in the world. We heard that it was between those two guys, but all of a sudden that idea that you had to go crazy to go up to 5 to get Obi Toppin seemed unlikely. And
Then you look at
then
the teams coming up after, and you're like, they're not gonna
right,
take over Dobbin.
right, yeah. Now I think so I look at that and say, well, we're seeing something similar here. The only thing that's different is it seems like the teams that are right behind them, whether it be Detroit, whether it be Indiana, it seems like those teams would die to to get Jaden Ivey.
So have
And
we
that's
heard
why
that?
and that's why
I haven't heard that.
I mean, I've seen that Detroit is interested, or at least I've seen that Ivy's interested in Detroit. I think
Right.
he called it, a home away from home, considering where he's from. Like, I think that they would kill to get him, and now we know Indiana would definitely kill to get him, but I think Detroit assumes that's a lost cause. They have been among the teams that have discussed moving up to 5-4. That's how I know that there's interest, because from the reporting, Detroit has been one of the teams that have talked. It's probably going to take a lot for a team like Detroit to want to move up one spot, because at that point you could be totally being bluffed and had. That's why I think Detroit doesn't get talked about as much, because we're like, they're not going to trade crazy assets to go up one spot.
Yeah, unless you hear somebody else has a deal,
Right, and they already made their move with Jeremy Grant, which we'll have to get to soon. But like that is kind of that is where that issue lies with this. That is different than the top situation. The top situation is there really was no one between 5 or 6 and 8 or 9, wherever the hell the Knicks were that year. I think they were 8.
Yes.
That was going to take Toppin, so the Knicks could just stay pat. Indiana may have to worry about Detroit if you say, okay, we're going to let them fall to 6. The Knicks will have to worry about Indiana and Detroit, and those other teams who may just luck into Jaden Ivey. So I find it hard to believe he will fall. But when you mentioned the possibility, I did think about the Toppin situation, where Toppin was, I won't say a lock to go 5, but a lot of people thought he would be top 5, and the Knicks were prepared to move up potentially to get him, and they didn't have to.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you mentioned the Knicks. Do you want to? Obviously, look, you're the resident Knicks fan. They're at 11. Yeah. It's an interesting spot because you don't really control your own destiny.
No. Shout out to, first of all, before we get to the Knicks, I want to shout out some of the people that are actually on the chat. Shout out to Adel Chapman. I'm adding this to there's a comment he made here that this situation with Mike Brown sounds reminiscent of Tibbs when I was talking about the situation and coach matching players that you're drafting. Obviously, we saw with Tibbs, he got Obi Toppin and buried him for like 3/4 of a year. So let's hope for the Kings' sake, if they do decide to get someone like Murray or someone like what's the name, Murray or Ivy, that they don't decide to do that. There was another comment here I want to shout out, if I can get my mouse over here. And this is the beauty of live. Some of this is us learning how to do things on the fly. Like you saw me, again, throw up a million graphics at once. Accidentally, I tried to sneakily get that in there because I forgot to throw it in. Untamed Music puts in, I trade JB for Jonche. Fight me. Who is JB?
I'm assuming. Look, I'm the resident Celtics fan, so when I hear JB,
maybe it's Jaylen Brown. Brown. I think you're right. I think you're right right about that. I saw that comment. It was one of the first comments we got. Also, shout out to Hunter Iggy. He just said, "What up to New Generation Media." I'll put it up there for the sake of just having it up there. Shout out to Hunter who gave us a comment. But back to the so this is a Brown conversation, which is interesting. I was like, yo, who is JB? I'm thinking about all the teams we talked about early on.
Yeah, I give Madison Square Garden, bring DeJounte to the Knicks.
And I'm like, yo, man, I don't want any smoke with MSG Networks, man. I know JB Smooth be doing a bunch of stuff in MSG Networks. I actually am a big fan of JB Smooth. Right, Jalen
But for
Brown.
DeJounte Murray, hey, shoot.
Shoot, I know. I would trade JB Smooth. I'd trade Tracy Morgan. Who else? Who else be showing up
Chris
on
Rock,
MSG? Yeah, who else be showing up on MSG and
Celebrity
those
Row.
dinner shows, Celebrity Row dinner shows that they be doing. Um, so before I get to the Knicks, I mean, quickly, what is the situation with Dejounte Murray that's happening? I mean, we're hearing from Jake Fisher that Dejounte Murray is a player right now that can be had. According to Fisher, he's saying that. Let me drop down that other one so you can see the lows that I put up there. That the Spurs right now are open to trading the All-Star point guard, and if they do make a trade with the All-Star for the All-Star point guard, they are looking for a package similar to what Milwaukee got for Drew Holiday. And if you remember, that included 3 first-round picks, so a massive haul in that regard. He also says that the Atlanta Hawks, not JB and the Celtics, but the Hawks have been a team that has indeed been involved in conversations with Dejounte Murray. How do you feel about this Murray situation that is ensuing? It was very weird on Twitter. He was like retweeting like the reports that he might get traded, which I've never quite seen before. It made me wonder, did he potentially request a trade and now he's talking about it? He also posted a tweet that had Zach LaVine in a Spurs jersey, so I don't know what the hell Dejounte Murray's up to. Shout out to Dejounte Murray, though. Hell of a season and hell of a player. A guy that, if you listen to our podcast, the year he was drafted, I think we talked about how much we both like Dejounte Murray. But what do you make of A, should the Celtics get involved and maybe look at someone like Jaylen Brown, and B, just in general, his value in the market and potentially this deal that may happen with the Hawks?
Who was it that had the comment about Jaylen Brown?
That was Untamed Music. I'll put him.
Untamed.
I'll throw it back up there.
Look, man, Jake Paul just announced his card. We may have to add me and Untamed Music to the Jake Paul celebrity fight because he said fight. So I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm not trading Jaylen Brown for DeJounte Murray. But as a Celtics fan, I will say the idea of DeJounte Murray and the Celtics is very intriguing because look, defensively they're already elite. You're talking about one of the best defense teams in the country in the league. But the problem is, the point guard play, the playmaking was lacking at times. So there has been some talk about should they move Marcus Smart for DeJounte Murray. I mean, who's a better defensive player? I would say Marcus Smart, but you're not losing that much on the defensive side of the ball, but you're gaining a lot from an offensive perspective if you make that move for DeJounte Murray. A lot steadier of a player, maybe not a guy who's gonna explode like Smart can sometimes, but can consistently give you your 15 to 20 a night. So I totally agree with Untamed Music that DeJounte Murray is a guy that the Celtics should target. I don't want to trade Marcus Smart. If you can finagle something that involves Grant Williams and Peyton Pritchard or Robert Williams into the conversation, but obviously you have to give up something to get something. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll be the Celtics, but it does sound like DeJounte Murray is in the mix to be moved. The Zach LaVine thing is interesting because him and LaVine are both from Washington, Washington State, Pacific Northwest, so they obviously know each other pretty well. So yeah, it's interesting. The Spurs obviously are an interesting team to watch because they're at 9, and if they do move Murray, does that open up a hole for them at the point guard spot? I mean, they drafted Trey Jones, but after that, they have a lot of 2 guards, but I don't know if Josh Primo projects as a long-term point guard. So does make you wonder, do they try and get in on the Jaden Ivey sweepstakes? Do they reach for a guy like Ty Washington? Do they take a guy like Dyson Daniels, who's not a pure point guard, but can certainly play the point guard spot?
Yeah.
The Spurs now, if they draft Dyson Daniels, that'd probably be like the 6th year in a row they drafted somebody between 6'4" and 6'7". But, so it'll be right in line. But still, interesting team, but so what's your take on the Murray situation? And then
I want to get back to the Knicks. Yeah, and I like this. This is a segue to the Knicks because actually, to me, when I think of the Murray situation, I know the Knicks are apparently readying the readying the all the situation, readying all the boats, readying all the cargo, getting
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
set up so that they can ship a bunch of dudes out so they can give a lot of money to Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson is an unrestricted free agent. They seem to think that they will have a shot to get him, a very good shot to get him. I saw a report recently that Dallas may be very wary of going up to $100 million to get someone like Jalen Brunson back into the fold. As a Knicks fan, I'm a little wary about giving $100 million to to Jalen Brunson. There's a part of me that wonders, why don't you maybe take this package that you're looking to give for Jaden Ivey and move it over to the Spurs for Dejounte Murray? Murray is a more proven commodity. Murray is a hellacious defensive player. And Murray is a natural point guard, which I just don't. I have not been someone projecting Jaden Ivey as a point guard. I'm not saying that he can't play it or that he can't be a lead guard, but I'm drafting him as a shooting guard if I'm drafting him. And I think the Knicks should draft him as a shooting guard if they take him. I love Jaden Ivey, and I want the Knicks to move up. But if you are talking about potentially filling that point guard void, why not go after someone like Dejounte Murray, who's not going to be as expensive as Jalen Brunson? Now, he does have an ACL history. That is something to think about. It's not nothing. He played great last year. He's played great for several years now, and we know where the science has gone when it comes to ACL injuries. But it's a conversation to have that I would wonder if I'd be more comfortable just unloading guys that you want to unload anyway in terms of salary. Yeah, you're gonna have to give up a lot of assets, but you actually fill a true need at point guard, as opposed to maybe getting a guy who has the athletic traits and the potential to maybe be a good point guard, but you're gonna have to convert him, and he's a rookie. And if the Knicks are in this position where they're trying to win sort of soon, I wonder why you don't go down that route. So the Knicks situation is interesting. When it comes to them at 11, I mean, I am in favor of them trading up to get someone like Ivy. If you can't get Ivy, I know there's been talk about, do you try to trade with Portland? That seems a little less likely because there's no home for Randall now. But Portland has been a team that's been discussed as someone that the Knicks could maybe trade up with. I think I maybe seen some things that they've talked to Detroit too, but I don't really think that'll be very likely, especially if Ivy's not in the conversation. I think if they to me, if you can't get up to 4 or you don't want to get up to 4, I'm not trading up. I would either stay at 11 or I would look to potentially trade back. But it's got to make sense. It's got to be the right pieces, the right guys that are available. I love for now the third straight video I'll be talking about Ryan Rollins. If Knicks traded down and got more assets or more first round picks and ended up with one of those guys being Ryan Rollins, I would be totally happy. It wouldn't matter who else was on the board at 11 within reason, within the guys I expect to be at 11. If they don't do that and they want to stay at 11, that's totally fine too. But this is going to be very interesting. Every report that you keep hearing is that nobody expects the Knicks to draft at this spot. That they will either make some massive trade up, or they will make a trade down, or they may trade out of the draft to dump salary. So we're in a situation where, because this organization says nothing to nobody, we have no idea what the hell the Knicks are going to do. Because all you're getting is word from agents and word from other teams that are just saying the conversation that they're having, but you can't trust those other teams. They're saying things that may help try to get something in the media to help them get what they want in a situation or a negotiation. Yeah. So the Knicks, in my opinion, come into this as one of the biggest wild cards because they do have future assets. They have this thirst to improve their roster because of the fan base, because of how disappointing this year was. And they have a glut of players that don't make sense. They got like a million wings. Like they got Fournier on a big deal. Cam Reddish is coming up on a contract year, and he's getting ready for his rookie extension. RJ Barrett's got to get extended. They got Quentin Grimes now into the fold. Alec Burks could be on his way out. Like all these guys are all wings. They got to get rid of some of these guys. Yeah. So you would think that with this pick being involved, that's going to be in play maybe to get one of these guys out of there. So, but you're hearing this stuff with Indiana, not necessarily for 5, but you're hearing it with taking on someone like Malcolm Brogdon, which I think would be a disaster. There's nothing against Malcolm Brogdon as a player. He's a solid player. But I think it is ridiculous to trade a lottery pick for someone the caliber of Malcolm Brogdon. Because he's injury prone, because he's not really been a player that has been a major difference maker for Indiana for the past few years, and a player who's not old, but I don't know if he's getting any better. Like, I think he probably is what he is at this point. I think that would be a disaster. I would much rather take a swing on someone like Jaden Ivey or take even a bigger swing on an all-star caliber player like Murray than trade your lottery pick for someone like Malcolm Brogdon.
So
it sounds right now they're resistant to, by the way. I don't want to put that out there.
Right, yes. So we're talking a lot about Jaden Ivey and DeJounte Murray, but I got to put you on the spot. I mean, the most realistic scenario is that the Knicks are just going to stay at 11. Right. What's the name that you want to hear as a Knicks fan? Who's going to get the boo from EJ? And who's going to get the cheer from your apartment?
That's a good way to put that, because there will be a loud reaction from my apartment. Oh, yeah. I was just saying just my apartment here.
Yeah, there will be
here in Queens, New York. I think for me, the way it sounds like someone like AJ Griffin is falling. He's a great shooter. I mean, if he was there and you're deciding not to move down, I would look at him. I know I've been very bullish on getting someone like Mark Williams or Duren if Mitchell Robinson moves on. It sounds like Mitchell Robinson is not going to move on. It sounds like the Knicks are optimistic they'll re-sign him to a deal. So now center is off my board. I don't care about getting a center at this point. So now it's either backcourt help or a wing to replace whatever wings we lose, because you're going to have to get rid of some of these guys. So I think someone like Dyson Daniels, if he falls, I think someone like AJ Griffin, if he falls, would be the two guys I would probably target.
So you've been too positive.
But there's a scenario though where those guys go where we expect, where now you're gonna have to go at kind of the B and C list guys.
As we know,
Malachi Branham or someone like that comes into play.
As we know, Knicks fans, you're a Knicks fan, EJ. I know you're not this positive. Who's the name that you hear it and then you throw you break your TV?
Ooh.
Who's the name where you're like,
okay,
what are we doing here?
I'll give you one. Jeremy Sohan. And it has nothing to do with Jeremy Sohan. I think he's a great defensive player. I love how active he is. But as I've told everybody when I've talked about the draft with this situation, because I've heard people talk about Sohan, I've heard people talk about other guys who play the 4. Drafting a power forward would be the dumbest thing the Knicks can do in this draft, because they just dealt with this situation with Randall and Toppin. I assume if they're drafting a 4, it is because one of those guys is gone. If that is the case, you're just creating a problem that you already had with the other two guys. They drafted Obi Toppin in the lottery. They kept Julius Randle around. Randle has this great year. You can't play Toppin. So now Toppin doesn't get the great development his rookie year. Second year, Randle's still in the fold coming up for the All-Star year. And Toppin is improving, but Randle stinks. But you can't play both of these guys together, and now you have this issue with both of these guys not being able to coexist. They cannot have two high-value players at the power forward position. So, Eason, Sohan, any guy like that, yes, I'm throwing my remote control. I don't want to hear that. It's got to be someone in the backcourt, or if you're telling me he's a 5 and they actually are concerned about Mitchell Robinson leaving, that's fine. But it has to be a backcourt player. It cannot be someone at the 4.
So let me ask you real quick, rapid fire. Give me thumbs up, thumbs down. You can say thumbs up, thumbs down on certain players if they end up being the next selection.
Let's do it.
Johnny Davis.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Ousmane Dieng. Thumbs down. Okay, interesting.
Do not give me a guy who needs to play the 4. Yeah, don't give me that guy.
He might be able to play the 3, but he's just a project.
And he's a complete project and an intriguing player. He got a lot of skills. We talked about in our last comparisons video, similar to Nick Batum, but no, I don't need him for the Knicks.
Yeah, and he might. I mean, there's a solid chance he goes ahead of the Knicks. So
it's interesting too. I saw that Ousmane, apparently said his best friend that's in the NBA right now is Evan Fournier, which I took note of.
Interesting.
It could mean nothing. It could mean everything. but
Yeah.
that is but that is something that I took note that he actually said that. That's Usmani Dieng stats from last year, playing over in New Zealand in the Australian League. So yeah, intriguing player. Not necessarily a guy I want for the Knicks.
Uh, you mentioned Malachi Branham, Ty Washington.
We haven't talked a lot about these point guards at all during this draft
There's not
season.
much to talk about.
There isn't. If they stayed at 11 and took Washington, I'm gonna go thumbs down.
Okay.
Not
I
necessarily.
think
Not
a
ne-
lot of the Garden will go down. He's a
Yeah,
Kentucky guy. I
it's
think.
not even so much that they took him. I just think that 11 is not his value. I told you when we talked about it the few times we have on air, or talked about it plenty off air. I look at Washington as a guy who is not lottery value. I think that he's first round value. I think that if you took him at 18 or 20, somewhere like that, he's a high character guy. I believe he will be a good shooter. I know he didn't shoot well this year, but I watched him coming out of high school. He was a deadly shooter out of high school. I think he wasn't used that great at Kentucky, so I think he'll shoot the ball well in the NBA. Right, with Kentucky not using guys correctly. I think he'll shoot the ball well in the NBA, but right now, I no, I don't think at 11 that makes sense. I think you could trade down and get him or someone comparable.
I totally agree with you that the name that I would circle for the Knicks is AJ Griffin.
Mm-hmm.
If he's not available, the other name I would circle is Johnny Davis. I mean, and Jalen Duren. I mean, obviously, I love Jalen Duren. I'm a Memphis guy in general, but those would be the three. I think those are just from a board standpoint. If you're looking at who are the best players available, those are the three guys that I think have a really good chance at still being all stars. Really good chance at being high level guys. Other than that, I don't think Shaden Sharp's going to go fall to 11. And I mean, Benedict Mathurin probably not going to fall to 11. Ochai Abaji, is that a thumbs up?
I'll do mid.
Okay.
Like I like Abaji. Not crazy about 11, but
right.
I like that pick way better than Ty Washington at 11. I think he's closer to that value than Washington is.
Agreed.
I put up shout out to Christopher. Forgive me for trying to pronounce his last name on first try. Oyadelemi. Hopefully I got that right. He says there, if AJ Griffin falls, that would be great. I agree, Christopher. I agree. I think that if that something like that happened, I think you gotta just call it a day. I'm not gonna trip about trading back. I'm not gonna trip about trading back. I'm not gonna trip about getting more value. I think that that's a good player at a good spot, and I would be inclined to take the flyer on Griffin. Are you at all concerned about the fact that Griffin it seems to me that Griffin and Sharp feel to me the guys that are falling. We don't know if they're actually falling.
So
we won't actually know until the draft actually happens, but it feels like those guys are falling. So how do you feel about Griffin in where he's at right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I love AJ Griffin. He's a top 5 guy in the draft for me. So if he goes outside the top 10, I think whoever gets him is getting a massive, massive, massive steal from a value perspective. But I don't have access to medical. I don't have access to pre-draft interviews. I don't have access to intel that a lot of scouts and a lot of teams have. So I hate to be the guy that's like, these teams are idiots because I don't have all the information they have. But based off the film and based off the high school history and just based off of what I've seen in the stats, I think he's a guy that projects long term as a really, really good NBA player. I mean, the shooting, I think, is going to translate. I was one that was skeptical about his shooting ability coming into college, certainly, but then also even when he had a hot start early on, I was like, it's not gonna. He can't continue to shoot at this 50% pace. And I was wrong. He only shot at a 45% pace, the rest of the season. But still, I mean, but this guy to me, he's a guy that if I were the Knicks, it's a little bit of overlap with guys like R.J. Barrett and Quentin Grimes, but I think he winds up being a cornerstone player long term if you do take him. And to get that at 11, the steal plus his dad's relationship with Thibodeau, I don't know. He's the guy I would circle. But I do want to ask you.
Well, can I get one question Can I get one question in here, or is it a Nick question?
No, you got it.
Yeah, I just want to get one question in from some of the comments. First of all, Christopher said I got his name right, so that's awesome. Shout out to Christopher. Thanks for contributing to the show. Um,
Yes.
Interesting question by Jonathan Waters. I believe it has a typo, but I'm gonna put it up there anyway. Does Jokic, which I think he means Jovic, make it out of the lottery? And Nikola Jovic, if you guys are not familiar with him, he is a 6'11" small forward slash shooting guard from Europe. His name is very similar to Nikola Jokic, but his name is Nikola Jovic, and he's a player that before the season started and his European season started was looked at as a potential top 10 guy. It feels like Jovic and Jaden Hardy are kind of like uh, distant relatives
Yeah,
in
similar
regard to
profile.
like draft experience. Like both guys were just like, oh man, we're gonna be made men next year, and now both appear to be fighting for their first round lives.
So it
Is there a chance that someone takes a flyer though on Jovic if that is the case, Kendall?
so
What do you
that's
think?
what that sort of goes in line with my question. So
Okay, great.
I'll still
So
ask
it
you,
worked perfectly in there.
but I was gonna ask, you know, from a draft superlatives, who will be the guy? Who will be this year's draft? Josh Primo. Who will be the guy that gets drafted way higher than anybody thinks? And I think Nikola
Mm,
Jovic, there's a. I'm not saying he wasn't necessarily the guy, but that he's certainly a name that is gone very quiet amongst NBA circles. But sometimes that happens when a guy has a promise. When and he has
right.
been working out with teams and whatnot. But sometimes guys go quiet, and then a team drafts him for again. Josh Primo was like that. Drafts him way higher than people expect. So Jovic, I mean, I like him better than I think I've seen him on most mock drafts. I have a higher grade on him than I guess the
Yeah.
rest of the league does. I think he should be a top 20 guy. If he gets drafted in the lottery, I think that's right around where his talent level suggests. But
I'll give you a
you
guy.
know,
And it's not if he got drafted super high. I'll give you two guys. And if
yeah,
either of these guys got drafted super high, I wouldn't be.
how high are we talking?
I wouldn't even be offended. Let's say both of
Lottery,
these guys are lottery, like not like the 14th or 15th pick. Like let's say these guys are like
between
fairly
10,
high lottery, like between 10
yeah,
and 13 or whatever.
right.
Um, Marjan Beauchamp, I think, is a
That would be a
player.
very surprise. Yeah,
Yeah, I think he is extremely athletic. He has more one-on-one game than I think he showed at the G League Ignite in the games in G League Ignite. I think that if you watch like his like stuff from, I guess he was playing like in like community college or whatever he was playing. Like this dude,
he had an interesting journey. Yeah,
yes, he had a very interesting journey, and he's a very great story. I suggest anybody who wants to learn more about Marjan, check him out. But he's been in the NBA system for a while. He's gotten great exposure. I think if he was someone who we hear his name, somewhere in the top 15, I wouldn't be shocked, but I think it would be surprised. Some people were saying, "Oh wow, really? That happened?" And then the other guy I have here, who I think also would be a person that if their name came out, I'd be like, "Oh wow, really? That happened?" Um, Dallin Terry. I think
interesting.
I think that
That would be another shot.
yeah, it would be a shock, but I think here's a couple of things. One, he has incredible length for his position. Some people think he could play point guard, and I'm not even gonna fight them on that. Like he's a very good passer. He's a good ball handler. Like if you thought you could make him a 6'7" point guard, have at it. So he's got extreme length. He, like I said, is a great passer. This draft may not have great point guards from like the standpoint that we look at point guards, but they have a lot of great passers at the point guard position, and he's one of them. So he's a great passer, and this guy plays real defense. So defense, switchability, multiple positions, and also generally very likable. It sounds like it seems like a lot of teams have enjoyed their time with him, and that was the word when he was at Arizona. That he was just a kind of an infectious guy, kind of like a glue guy. Someone
Yeah,
took a fly,
next.
and he left when I was a little surprised he left. I think he could have done another year, but when those guys leave, it's usually because they got great word from somebody that they would take them fairly high. So I'll give you those two names as guys that if their names were announced early, a lot of people would be like, "What the hell?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, what the hell?" But I kind of get it.
The two for me that I would look at. So I'll give you three. 'Cause I had two, but then I saw another name that
Yeah.
intrigues me. I think I think so. I told you. I mean, I have a lot of names, but I'll just run. I'll run
All
through.
right, well,
I
let's go. Let's
mentioned
go through. We got how much time we got here? We got the
about
countdown,
10 minutes.
and literally at 10 minutes. Shout out to everybody who's been rocking with us for 10 minutes away from the NBA draft.
I got Ryan. I think I mentioned in our sleepers video, Ryan Rollins. If he goes in the lottery, if he goes 14 to Cleveland, people are gonna be like, "Who is
That would
this
be
guy?"
a great pick. But yes, that would be surprising.
Yeah, people will be like, "Who is this guy?" And then, but we'll understand it. It won't be as surprising as Primo. I don't think any of these names that we're mentioning will be as surprising as Josh Primo. That was something
No. That was
won't be replicated. I don't think.
no.
But I think Walker Kessler could go in the lottery.
Oh,
Or could go. I mean, he's at the draft, so again, not shocking. But
you're right.
I think he could go in the top 15, top 15 or so, and that would be a little bit surprising to people. I mentioned I mean, in our mock draft, I had Jaden Hardy going 14, but you
Right.
look at some mock drafts and he's not in the first round, so that would
Right.
still be surprising. I think to a lot of people. And lastly, I think a guy that would be a surprise is a guy you had as a sleeper, Jake LaRavia. I think could wind up going higher than people expect. Kid out of Wake Forest. Am I allowed to call him a young gentleman? I am technically older than him.
Yeah, I'll give you the young gentleman.
We'll allow
The
it.
young gentleman allowance there. Yeah.
For Jake LaRavia, although he's about 10 inches taller than me, so I think I don't know he'll be like it's kind of weird. But regardless, LaRavia, there was actually word that he was listed on Google as 22 years old for much of the draft process, and then he found that out and was like, had to tell scouts, I'm actually 20, by the way.
Oh wow. That's interesting.
So all you guys calling me an old gentleman, I'm actually a young gentleman. But that ended up, actually boosting his draft stock even more when teams found out he was 2 years older than many of them thought he was, 2 years younger rather. So he's actually a guy that I think, if he went in that 12 to 16 range, that would surprise a lot of people. Again, a lot of people, even college basketball fans, would be like, who's this guy? But I think he's a guy that could go a lot higher. In the same vein, is there a team that could pull the San Antonio Spurs Josh Primo pick that we should be watching? Who's the team that we're gonna watch?
I think you mentioned them. I mean, to me, I think the Cleveland Cavaliers as a team that is drafting
make the most wild card pick.
Right, they're at the end of the lottery. They have a very solid young nucleus, a team that I think would have made the playoffs if it was not for those disastrous injuries that just continue to just mount up at the worst times. It wasn't even like they all happened at once. It was just like one guy gets injured, they figure a way to play without that guy, and then another guy gets injured. They try to find a way to play with that guy, and then another guy gets injured. They just couldn't at all withstand all of that. I think they're the team though, with some of these guys coming back at full strength, will say, hey, we got a young team that if we stay healthy, we'll be in the playoff mix for sure. We probably need another guy who has a high ceiling kind of guy because we have Garland, who's nasty, but he's still a 6'2" point guard.
Is he a 1A? Do we have any 1A now?
Yeah, Jarrett Allen, who's a really solid big man, but I don't think he's a guy he's not Embiid or something like that. Like he's not a 25 and 10 guy.
Do we have any MVP guys? And
right.
Mobley's closest thing to that. But.
Right. So are they the team that says, okay, we are in a position because A, we do have young talent that can get us back to the playoffs, hopefully.
Right.
But B, we could say, let's go and just take a crazy swing on somebody that we believe in and hope that it hits. Because if it doesn't, we still got other good young players here.
I think the lottery is where obviously that's where that would happen because that's where teams will take that's where the surprises will happen. But what I'll say is that I think it actually will happen in the middle of the lottery rather than the back. I think it starts with Portland. Portland, I think Portland's a weird situation. I don't know if they'll do anything too crazy, but they're a team to watch. But then really, I think it seriously starts with New Orleans at 8 because they're in a similar situation that you mentioned to Cleveland, where it's gravy. They don't need this pick. They were a playoff team anyway. They're getting Zion back. They have him last year. If New Orleans decides we're going to take, another name we didn't mention as a potential, Josh Primo pick. I think this guy, he's moving up draft boards, but they decided we're taking
shout out to Tank Them, by the way. You've seen the draft order that they have listed here.
Yes, free promo for TankDon.com. They're not paying us, unfortunately. But But no, but I think Jalen Williams could wind up going from Santa Clara. If he winds up going in the top 10, like people again, plenty of people will be like, who's Jalen Williams?
Mm.
But and then again, if he goes in the back of the lottery, that's not as big of a surprise. It's like so there's still gonna be people that don't know who he is, but but if New Orleans drafts a guy like
That's a
Jalen
little bit
Williams,
of a surprise to NBA people. But I think if you really follow this draft, it does sound like teams love Jalen Williams, and for good reason.
right
Another guy,
now again, if he goes in
great
the top
passer.
10, if he goes in the top
Yeah,
10,
that
that would
would be
still be a
surprising.
shock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. If he goes top 10, that would be a shock for sure.
Yeah, but if again New Orleans, I think San Antonio and Washington, but I think the main one is OKC at 12. I think OKC at 12. If they have to,
Yeah, I
stick
said
with
2 before, but they're at 12. I said 11, I think, but yeah.
Yeah, if OKC sticks with that 12th pick, man, they could go in a million different directions. I think people expect they'll just take whoever falls to them, whether it be Johnny Davis or maybe it's Jeremy Sohan or AJ Griffin, Shaden Sharp. Somebody's going to be there. But I also could see them going way off the board and taking a Jalen Williams or taking the Dallin Terry that you were talking about or taking a Nikola Jovic. So those are the teams that I would watch for. But yeah, I'm excited.
It should be a great night because I like to use all of the stuff I've prepared for this show. Real quickly, less than a minute on this, Kendall. What did you think of Portland deciding to take a flyer on Jeremy Grant, trading their 2025 first round pick to the Pistons? I actually really love this deal, and
I mean, it's great value.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's great value for a guy, Jeremy Grant, that I've always been a fan of. I think he is exactly the kind of player that they've been missing. And hearing that they're also interested in Dort actually really excites me. Makes me think that maybe,
well.
yeah, and OG Anunoby as well. Like, they are now looking for the right type of guy. Because Portland, too often, as much as I love skill and talent and guys who can score, they overvalue that a bit. And when it came to push comes to shove against great teams in the playoffs, they couldn't stop anybody. And when those guys were banged up and the game got a little more physical, they wilted. They need more athletic guys, more defenders, especially on the wing. That's been a position that, and they've tried through the draft to get those kind of guys, to be fair. It hasn't quite worked out. But in terms of signings and things like that, they haven't gotten those kind of guys. Jeremy Grant, I think, is a great fit because he can kind of mask some of the issues you had defensively with Lillard, with someone like Nurkic that they bring back. And if you add another wing defender, switchable kind of guy like OG or Lou Dort, I gotta say, I'm not saying this team's gonna win a championship, but I do like the early returns on what Portland's doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting move. I mean, right now it sort of feels like the Covington deal with the Clippers at the deadline, where you're like, I mean, yeah, it makes them better. Covington and Powell, it makes them better, but they don't have Kawhi and PG. So like, this makes the Blazers better, but they're not going to win a championship with Jeremy Grant.
Yeah, which should be the goal because that's only why Dame Lillard's there.
That's the only reason. That's the only reason. That's the only thing Dame Lillard wants to do at this point is try and win a championship. So
right.
that's the the unfortunate reality. But I do enjoy Jeremy Grant as a player. I think he's a very modern NBA power forward. He fits exactly what teams want nowadays. And again, only get him for a first round pick in 2025. I say that, and then we realize Damian Lillard won't be there, and then it winds up being whoever the number one player, in the country is in 2024, so yeah, it ends up being a first round pick. I'm assuming unprotected. So
yeah, I think it's like top 3 protected, I believe.
Top 3 protected. Okay. Yeah. So not as bad. But still, interesting trade. I think it's only the beginning for Portland. So there again, another fun team to track this tonight. I mean, I think every team's fun to track right now. I mean, this is going to be a very exciting draft night. I'm hoping the Celtics can get involved at some point, but we'll be locked in.
Well, we'll be locked in, guys. As you guys see, coming up on 30 seconds left for the start of the NBA draft broadcast.
I'm about to turn the TV on over here.
Yeah, I'm about to head back in the living room and get ready for either some greatness or some sorrow. But I want to shout out to everybody who's in the comment section, everybody who's giving us a like, everybody who's checked out this, our first ever pre-show live stream of the NBA draft. Hope you guys enjoy the show. I mean, this was fun. This was fun, and we're still around. So who knows what we may do later on tonight or something that comes out this weekend. But this was something we've always wanted to do. I'm happy we were able to do it. Hope you guys enjoy the draft. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.